As we age, the subtle changes in our bodies begin to shape our daily experiences in ways that are often easy to overlook at first. Small shifts, like a bit of stiffness or the occasional ache, may initially seem insignificant, but they gradually accumulate, signaling the passage of time. These minor health concerns, often dismissed as normal parts of aging, can evolve into more persistent reminders that our bodies are no longer as resilient as they once were. For those who have enjoyed a lifetime of physical vitality, accepting these changes can be difficult. The process of navigating these shifts becomes not just a physical challenge, but an emotional one as well, evoking feelings of vulnerability and, at times, loss. The emotional impact of minor health concerns. When it comes to discussing these small health issues with loved ones, the act of sharing becomes a delicate balance. On one hand, there's a desire for connection and understanding, for our loved ones to acknowledge and share in our experiences. On the other hand, there is often the realization that talking about these minor aches and concerns might lead to unnecessary worry, particularly from those who care deeply for us. This tension is common in families, especially when the older generation, having lived through many challenges, does not want to burden their children or grandchildren with every minor discomfort. Consider the story of Mrs. Eleanor, a retired schoolteacher whose days were once filled with the hustle and bustle of educating young minds and managing a busy classroom. Now, in her 70s, her life is quieter, more reflective. She spends her time reading, tending to her beloved garden, and enjoying the occasional visit from her grandchildren. But like so many people in their later years, Eleanor has begun to experience the small signs of aging. Perhaps it's a stiff knee after an afternoon of gardening, or the slight ache that lingers a little longer after a long walk. One afternoon, while enjoying a quiet cup of tea with her daughter, Eleanor casually mentioned the stiffness in her knees. This comment, so matter-of-fact and unassuming, quickly set off a chain of events that would leave Eleanor feeling somewhat uneasy. Her daughter, who had always been a loving and attentive caregiver, immediately went into full-on protective mode. She began asking questions, trying to assess the severity of her mother's condition and researching possible remedies. Within hours, her daughter had consulted various online sources, reading up on herbal supplements, knee braces, and even specialized diets designed to alleviate joint pain. She was determined to find a solution to make her mother more comfortable. The burden of sharing. Protecting loved ones from unnecessary worry. The dilemma that Eleanor faced is one many people in their later years must grapple with. While it is natural to want to share one's experiences with family and loved ones, there comes a point when certain health concerns, particularly those that are relatively minor, might be better kept to oneself. The act of sharing can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, it can foster connection and understanding. On the other hand, it can inadvertently create stress and worry for those who care for us. This is particularly true for individuals who have lived independent, active lives and are now facing the challenges of aging. They may find that their health concerns, though minor, take on greater significance in the eyes of their loved ones. A simple mention of a stiff joint or a sleepless night can quickly lead to an outpouring of concern, as family members naturally want to ensure their well-being. In this sense, the small physical changes that we experience as we age can become a source of emotional weight, both for ourselves and for those around us. For many, the decision to keep certain health issues to themselves becomes an act of love. By choosing not to share every small ache or pain, they protect their loved ones from unnecessary worry. They don't want to be seen as fragile or in need of constant care, and they want to maintain a sense of independence for as long as possible. They also understand that their loved ones may begin to focus more on their physical vulnerabilities than on their strengths and wisdom, which can change the dynamic of the relationship in subtle but impactful ways. This decision to withhold information is not about being secretive or trying to hide reality. Rather, it is about protecting the emotional balance of the family. It is about ensuring that the relationships we have with our loved ones remain focused on the joy, connection, and strength we share, rather than the inevitable decline that comes with aging. The strength of silence. Choosing what to share. As we age, there is an inherent wisdom that comes with knowing when to share and when to remain silent. This is especially true when it comes to minor health concerns. While some aches and pains may feel significant in the moment, they are often temporary and manageable. By choosing not to focus on every small discomfort, we are able to maintain a sense of perspective and preserve the emotional well-being of those around us. For Eleanor, the decision to downplay her knee pain was not an attempt to hide the truth, but rather a way to protect her daughter from unnecessary concern. She knew that her daughter's desire to help was coming from a place of love, but Eleanor also understood that worrying about every minor ailment would only create stress and tension. Instead, she chose to focus on the things that brought her joy: her love of reading, the peacefulness of her garden, and the warmth of her family. In doing so, she preserved the peace and happiness in her relationships, allowing her daughter to see her not as a fragile elder, but as a strong, independent woman who was still very much in control of her life. In this way, silence becomes a powerful tool. It is not a rejection of help or a refusal to acknowledge reality, but rather a means of preserving the dignity and emotional health of both the individual and their loved ones. By choosing not to share every minor health concern, we allow ourselves to remain focused on the positive aspects of life, and we give our families the space to see us for who we truly are: resilient, wise, and capable of embracing life's challenges with grace. The dream of music, a fire that never faded. Mr. James's love for music had been his first passion, the one thing that truly set his soul on fire. As a young man, he had been captivated by the sound of the guitar, the strings that seemed to vibrate with a life of their own, pulling him into a world of rhythm, melody, and harmony. He could spend hours strumming away, getting lost in the music as it filled him with a sense of purpose and belonging. The guitar was more than just an instrument to him. It was an extension of his spirit, a way to express the emotions and thoughts that words could not fully capture. In those early years, Mr. James was determined to make his dream a reality. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, saving every penny he could spare from his job just so he could afford his first guitar. It was not easy, and it took time. But the day he finally held that guitar in his hands, he felt a sense of triumph. A sense that, despite the obstacles life had thrown at him, he had achieved something meaningful. For a brief moment, he thought that maybe, just maybe, this guitar would be the key to a different future, one where music would be at the center of his life. But as the years went by, reality set in. Life, as it often does, had its own plans for Mr. James. His path veered in a different direction, one that led him to marriage, to fatherhood, and to a steady, reliable career as a mechanic. He poured his energy into these roles, finding fulfillment in providing for his family, in the steady rhythm of work, and in the stability that his job as a mechanic offered. Music, once his first love, was relegated to the background of his life, a beautiful but distant memory. Yet despite the years that passed, Mr. James never fully let go of that original passion. The guitar remained tucked away, gathering dust in a corner of his home, a silent reminder of a dream that had not come to fruition. A moment of vulnerability, sharing the dream. Now in his 70s, Mr. James found himself reflecting more and more on the life he had lived, the choices he had made, and the dreams he had once held so dearly. He often wondered how his life might have turned out had he pursued music more seriously. Would he have found success as a musician? Would he have been able to share his gift with the world? These thoughts, though bittersweet, did not overshadow the satisfaction he felt in the life he had built with his family. Still, the dream lingered in his heart, quietly yearning to be acknowledged. One day, in a moment of vulnerability, Mr. James decided to share his long-held dream with someone who he thought might understand, his teenage grandson. The young boy had always looked up to Mr. James, admiring him not only for his mechanical skills, but also for the wisdom he imparted. The idea of opening up about his unfulfilled dream was difficult for Mr. James. He had always been a man of action, a doer, not one to indulge in what-ifs or regrets. But the yearning in his heart could no longer be ignored, and so he decided to share it with his grandson. He told the boy about his love for music, about the guitar he had saved up for, and the countless hours he spent learning chords and practicing in the quiet of his room. Mr. James spoke of the passion he had once felt, how the music seemed to speak to him in a way nothing else could. His grandson listened intently, but Mr. James could see the confusion in the young boy's eyes. He had never seen his grandfather in this light, and the revelation of this unfulfilled dream was jarring. For the grandson, Mr. James had always been a man who had it all together, strong, reliable, and unwavering. The idea that his grandfather had dreams that never came to be was unsettling, and the boy's reaction was a mixture of sadness and guilt. He felt as though somehow he might be responsible for Mr. James's unfulfilled aspirations, for the life that had steered him away from his musical dreams. Mr. James, sensing the discomfort in his grandson, began to question whether sharing this part of himself had been a mistake. It was a vulnerable moment, and one that left him feeling exposed, as if the weight of his unfulfilled dream had cast a shadow on the life he had built. He realized that in sharing his dream, he had unintentionally created distance between himself and his grandson, someone he had always thought of as a kindred spirit. The unspoken bond they shared had been momentarily fractured by the weight of regret and what could have been. Reclaiming the dream. A shift in perspective. As the days passed, Mr. James reflected more deeply on the conversation with his grandson and the emotions it had stirred. He came to a profound realization. While his dream of being a musician had always been important to him, it was not the defining element of his story. The life he had built, his family, his career, the sacrifices he had made, was just as meaningful, if not more so. He had given his all to his loved ones, and in doing so, he had created something far more valuable than any dream of stardom. His legacy was not in the music he had never made, but in the love he had shared and the lessons he had imparted to those around him. With this newfound perspective, Mr. James began to see his unfulfilled dream not as a source of regret, but as a quiet chapter in a much larger narrative. It was a part of who he had been, yes, but it did not define him. The dream of being a musician had shaped him in subtle ways, teaching him about passion, discipline, and the pursuit of something greater than oneself. But it was the life he had lived that had truly shaped him into the man he had become. He began to think of his unfulfilled dream as a private reflection, a small piece of his heart that needed no external validation. It was a part of his inner landscape, a silent companion that reminded him of the passions he had once held, and yet he realized that there was no need to share this dream with everyone. Not everyone needed to understand the depth of what it had meant to him. Sometimes, dreams were meant to be cherished quietly, tucked away in the heart, where they could continue to inspire without casting a shadow over the present. The wisdom of silence. Protecting the dream. Mr. James made a quiet decision. He would no longer share his unfulfilled dream with others, at least not in the way he had before. He would keep it close, a private treasure that only he would truly understand. This didn't mean he would ignore it or deny its existence. Far from it. The dream would remain with him, a part of his story that he carried with grace. But by keeping it to himself, he would protect his family from the sadness or guilt that might arise from hearing about a dream that had never come to fruition. He wanted them to see him as the man he was today, not as a figure weighed down by regrets. In the days that followed, Mr. James found that his decision to keep his dream private brought him a sense of peace. He no longer felt the need to share every aspect of his inner world. Instead, he focused on the stories that were truly meaningful to his family, The stories of his work as a mechanic, the pride he felt in mastering his craft, the joy he took in helping others. These stories were full of passion, dedication and purpose, and they allowed his family to see the same drive and commitment in him that he had once found in music. The guitar, though still tucked away in a corner of his home, was no longer a symbol of loss. It had become a quiet reminder of the man he had been and of the dreams that had shaped him in ways he had never fully understood. As Mr. James shared these stories with his grandson, the boy began to see a new side of him. He came to understand that his grandfather's love for craftsmanship, the way he could bring life to an old engine or repair something with his hands, was just as beautiful as the music he had once dreamed of creating. The passion that had fueled Mr. James's dreams of music had found a new expression in his work, and the lessons he had learned from both had shaped him into the man his family admired. A legacy of quiet strength, embracing what matters. In the end, Mr. James came to understand that unfulfilled dreams, while poignant, do not define us. They are simply part of the tapestry of our lives, woven with the threads of hope, disappointment and growth. By choosing to keep certain dreams private, we protect the integrity of our relationships and our own sense of peace. We allow our family and loved ones to see us for who we are today, not as someone defined by what we didn't achieve, but as someone who has lived fully, loved deeply, and created a life of meaning. Mr. James's decision to keep his dream to himself was not about denying its significance. It was about preserving the beauty of what he had built and sharing only what truly mattered. His legacy, he realized, was not in the dreams he had not fulfilled, but in the strength, resilience and love that had guided him through his life. And that, he knew, was the greatest gift he could give to his family, to be remembered not for the things he had missed, but for the life he had lived and the lessons he had imparted. By choosing to keep his unfulfilled dream close, Mr. James was able to embrace his story with grace and wisdom. He found peace in the knowledge that dreams, while important, are only one part of the journey. And in the end, it is the journey, the love, the laughter, the quiet strength that truly defines us. The desire to protect. As a mother, Mrs. Amelia's love for her daughter was unconditional, but so were her fears. The tension between these two conflicting emotions, love and fear, came to a head one evening when Mrs. Amelia felt compelled to express her concerns. Hoping to gently guide her daughter back to a more secure path, Mrs. Amelia suggested that she might want to reconsider the risks of her business venture. She suggested looking into more traditional job opportunities, ones that would offer stability and long-term security. Her words, though spoken with care, came across differently than she intended. Her daughter, who had poured her heart and soul into her business, felt a sharp pang of disappointment. To her, the suggestion was not one of concern, but of doubt. It stung to think that her own mother didn't fully believe in her dream or trust her ability to succeed. Her heart sank as she realized that, in her mother's eyes, her path was one of uncertainty, not potential. The pain of that realization was a heavy burden to carry, as if her mother's trust in her had been momentarily shaken. Mrs. Amelia too felt the weight of her words. The regret settled deep within her chest as she recognized the hurt she had unintentionally caused. She had hoped to protect her daughter, to shield her from the unpredictable nature of entrepreneurship. But in doing so, she had unintentionally cast a shadow of doubt on the very dream that her daughter was working so hard to build. Mrs. Amelia knew she had to reassess her approach, but the question remained: how could she offer her daughter the love and support she so desperately wanted to provide without allowing her own fears and doubts to influence her? The shift toward silent support. As Mrs. Amelia reflected on the situation, she began to understand that the best way to show her love was not through advice or guidance, but through silent support. She realized that she had spent much of her life trying to control outcomes, trying to steer her family members toward what she believed would bring them happiness. But now, She saw that her daughter's journey was uniquely hers to navigate. By stepping back, Mrs. Amelia could allow her daughter the freedom to succeed or fail on her own terms. In choosing to support her silently, without interference or critique, Mrs. Amelia would be offering her daughter a gift, space to grow, to make her own choices, and to discover her strength. Mrs. Amelia embraced this new approach. She made a conscious decision to hold her opinions close, choosing instead to provide her daughter with unconditional love and encouragement, no matter the circumstances. She resolved to stop offering unsolicited advice and to simply be there, ready to listen, celebrate her daughter's successes, and offer comfort during setbacks. The power of silent love. As time passed, Mrs. Amelia's decision to offer silent support brought about an unexpected change in her relationship with her daughter. Instead of feeling defensive or hurt when her daughter spoke about her business, Mrs. Amelia found herself listening more attentively, with genuine interest and pride. She admired her daughter's resilience, her courage in the face of uncertainty, and her unwavering dedication to her dream. The entrepreneurial path that had once filled Mrs. Amelia with worry now seemed to glow with possibility. She began to understand that her daughter's journey, with all its risks and rewards, was as meaningful and fulfilling as any traditional career. What Mrs. Amelia had not anticipated was the deep sense of joy she would find in this new role. No longer burdened by her own fears and doubts, she began to witness her daughter's growth in a way that she hadn't before. She was there to hear about the milestones, the triumphs, and the challenges, and each story filled her heart with pride. Rather than offering solutions or advice, Mrs. Amelia's quiet presence became a source of reassurance. Her daughter knew that no matter what happened, she would always have a mother who believed in her. Their relationship blossomed as a result of this newfound dynamic. Mrs. Amelia found herself celebrating her daughter's victories, no longer burdened by the weight of her own expectations. She realized that her daughter's happiness was not tied to the fulfillment of her own dreams for her, but to the pursuit of her own unique aspirations. The simple act of stepping back, of choosing silent support over vocal criticism, had allowed Mrs. Amelia to see her daughter as a fully realized individual, capable of charting her own course. The silent legacy of unconditional love. In the quiet moments of reflection, Mrs. Amelia realized something profound. By choosing silence over critique, she had created a lasting legacy of love and acceptance. The power of silent support was not just in its ability to strengthen their relationship, but in the lessons it imparted. Her daughter learned that true love does not come with conditions, and that family is a place where dreams, whether fulfilled or unfulfilled, are accepted, not judged. Mrs. Amelia's silent encouragement became a foundation upon which her daughter could build her future, knowing that she had her family's unwavering support. Mrs. Amelia's journey was a reminder that as parents and family members, we must recognize that each person's path is uniquely their own. The choices they make may not align with our expectations, but that does not diminish their worth or the love we have for them. By stepping back and allowing them the space to grow, we honor their individuality and empower them to forge their own way. The silent support that Mrs. Amelia offered her daughter not only strengthened their bond, but also taught her that love is most powerful when it is unconditional. It is not about fixing problems or offering solutions, but about being there, wholeheartedly, through all of life's ups and downs. The quiet love Mrs. Amelia shared with her daughter became a testament to the power of patience, understanding, and respect. The choice to silence, disappointment. As we reflect on the story of Mrs. Amelia, it becomes clear that the decision to offer silent support, even in moments of disappointment or concern, is one of the most profound acts of love we can offer our family members. In choosing silence over spoken criticism, we create space for understanding, trust, and emotional connection. We allow our loved ones to explore their paths, to make mistakes, and to grow into the people they are meant to be, without the pressure of our expectations. This decision is not always easy. It requires humility and a willingness to accept that our loved ones may not always make choices that we understand or agree with. But in the end, it is this very act of acceptance that strengthens our relationships and builds the foundation for a deeper, more meaningful connection. As you reflect on your own relationships, consider how you might offer silent support to those you love. How can you create a space where they feel free to pursue their dreams without the weight of your expectations? In doing so, you will leave behind a legacy of unconditional love, a legacy that will resonate with your family for generations to come.